Hi, this is Miss Brown, and today we're going to be doing our introduction into our unit on microorganisms. So first, what is a microorganism? A microorganism is any single-celled or an organism that has just a few cells. And they include things like bacteria, viruses, and fungi, along with some algae and some very small animals. So essentially, microorganisms are everywhere. They exist in every part of every biosphere, yet most of the time we don't even realize that they're there. We encounter things like viruses and bacteria honestly all the time on a daily basis, yet most of the time we don't even think about them. Today we're going to deal with a microorganism that we also deal with on a fairly regular basis because it's in bread. Not everyone knows this, but yeast is actually a fungus that is a microorganism that helps our bread rise. So today we're going to be activating some of our dry active yeast. Now, the interesting thing about yeast is it's one of the foods that actually has a pretty sure date on it to when you can use it and how long it's good after you open it. Because once you open your jar of microorganisms, the microorganisms are going to start to die off. So if all of your yeast is dead, then it's not really going to be able to produce any gases to help your bread rise. So today, in order to activate our yeast, we have a little bit of warm water in this jar. We have sugar to act as food, and we have the yeast itself. So first, we are going to take some sugar, and we are going to add it into our water and kind of stir it around to make sure that our water is nice and full of food. And we are going to take our yeast and we're just going to sprinkle it on top of the water. So you can see that there. And the thing that you look at, because this is where we'll see the change, is if you look right here, we don't really see any bubbles. We can see the yeast, but there's not really any bubbles at this point in time. So, yeast is a single-celled organism that, as I said, was part of the fungus category. And yeast, especially the kind that we use in our food, takes carbohydrates and it converts them into carbon dioxide and alcohols. And it's that carbon dioxide that helps to create the bubbles in our bread. Yeast is just one type of, or the yeast we eat is just one type of yeast, and there are types of yeast that exist throughout the entire earth, many of which we can't eat. So now we're going to take a look at the yeast after it's been sitting for a while, and I did this about 10 minutes ago. And although it's not a big change, we can see along the side now that we have lots of bubbles. And these bubbles are the carbon dioxide that is forming. So as I mentioned as well, yeast can produce alcohols. So I don't know if anyone has ever eaten sourdough bread, but it has a tart flavor to it. So what happens with sourdough bread is I would take this mixture here, which is the yeast and water, and I would mix it with flour, because flour is like a food for yeast as well. So what I would then do is it would kind of create this thick, sticky substance, and I would leave it in the refrigerator, adding a little bit of flour and a little bit of water to it every day, and the alcohols that are produced start to make it taste tart. And that's what's called a bread starter. And so instead of just using the dry yeast, you would stick that in your bread, and that's what gives it that tartar flavor. So now we're going to start, and for the next few weeks we'll be studying microorganisms and seeing what cool things that we can find that they do for us.